I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And the reason I'm looking forward to this conversation is because of the panelists you can see in front of you. So in a moment, I'm going to throw over to each of them in turn to introduce themselves and just give us a little bit about their work. But we've got a real stratified level of experience here, as I mentioned at the top of the session, from the sort of overview and the long-standing experience through to the industry component, looking at brands, and then looking down into some of the complexities and challenges down in the details. As always, we're all used to this after the last couple of years. There is a Q&A and a chat function at the bottom of your window. If you want to put any questions to the panelists, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll endeavour to pull those into the conversation through the course of the next 60 minutes. Any other comments, chatting between participants, use the chat box there. But let's get into it. I'm going to start, just because of the order of my screen, I'm going to start with you, Sangita. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and a little bit about your work and where you're from.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, James. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sangita Raghuram, and I lead circular economy under the ESG platform in PwC India's management consulting practice. The practice that I'm part of provides advisory services to a range of clients, ranging from government entities across various levels, so center, state, and local, to private businesses across various sectors, donor agencies, PE funds, and foundations. So though my background is an urban planner by qualification, my work experience ranges from policy advisory to market entry strategies to implementation support and impact assessment. And in this process, I worked across water, waste, infrastructure, transport, etc. So this kind of an experience has been helping in creating innovative solutions for clients because, as Fernanda was also saying, multi-stakeholder perspective and a multifunctional approach is very important to achieve circularity. And that's the way we have been working across the clients for our practices, right? And looking forward to the discussion today.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'm coming to you next then, Dr. Saxena. Could you do the same?
Hi. Good evening, I'm Yogen Saxena, and I have about 4 decades of experience with Indian corporate, including Tata Power, Ambuja Cement, and Jubilant Life Sciences. And prior, I was in education in Jamaica, West Indies. Presently, I'm trying to spread the awareness in the primary and secondary schools on me and my Swachh Bharat, what an individual should do to make the country clean. And secondly, in business schools on sustainability and ESG. And just thinking that the way we can give whatever I have learned or earned during my life, just spreading in the schools, that is the best thing, so that the future can be slightly better than today in India. Thank you.
Saxena, thank you very much. And Smitha, coming to you next.
Hi, my name is Smita Gopalkrishnan, and I represent a company called 3M. My background is communications, actually more development communications. And I think that whole experience sort of came to full circle because in 3M India, I lead CSR, also working in brand and communications. And I'm also responsible for sustainability reporting for the company. I, really passionate about social impact, because I really believe that, the future is about not, it's not product driven, but it's really about how can we solve problems. And, all of us work, we will exist to solve a lot of these problems and to create a better world. So yeah, so sustainability is front and center for all of us today, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Amazing. And last but definitely not least, Pranshu, would you mind also introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. I am Pranshu Singhal. I am the founder of Karo Sambhav. I have been with Karo Sambhav now for 5 years since its inception. And prior to it, I was heading sustainability and education vertical at Microsoft. And before that, sustainability at Nokia in different regions, different parts of the world for almost 20 years.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So that's it, folks. That's our heavyweight panel. And to kick us off then, Dr. Saxena, I'd love for you to, I guess, provocate a little bit, but just to sort of set the scene, as you said, 4 decades of experience, you've probably seen a lot of conversations. So when we think about circular economy as a topic, as a concept, and the potential it has, or the opportunity for India, what are your perspectives on a statement like that?
Once Terry was interviewing me, which was earlier the Tata Energy Research Institute, and they say Saxena is a vocal environmentalist. So I would like to be a little vocal to give you the correct perspective. See, earlier, if you see in early 90s, when ISO started 9000, industry was behind 9000 because they were getting a logo to put on the either cement bag or the product packaging. ISO 14000 was a very good concept. It started like policy for environment. Slowly, they named sustainable development came, and everybody used to say, I am environmentally conscious. If I'm drinking half glass of water, I will say I'm environmentally conscious. Now we are talking of ESG, so we change our terms from sustainability reporting to ESG reporting. We are very quick in that. Corporate communication will agree with this. Sorry, Smita. And now we are talking circular economy. So what industry is doing, if they are utilizing little waste, they are saying we are in circular economy. Earlier, when we were kids, we were used to say, if you need 2 dots, if you want to draw a line. In circular economy, as Frenda says, we have 7 pillars. If you go on internet, you will find 9 pillars also. But in my opinion, circular economy has many pillars you cannot count. And industries must go in 10, 12, 15 direction, decide upon the geography of the industry. Like, for example, for me, having something in mountain is different and having something in the sea is different. If my industry is based near to the sea, I will not take the groundwater from the distance. I will certainly go for a desalination plant, and it will be a circular economy. So industry is not having a vision here, really speaking. If you take top 100, for example, Corporate of India, and if you see sustainability report of 3M also, they will have a vision and mission, but their vision and mission is on the piece of paper. The strategy is not there. That, for example, if I'm in power, I will decide that by 2050, we have to think of net zero. Why not 2030? Why wait 25 years? At least you say by 2030, we will have 30% on renewables. Or by 2040, we will go on solar by so much percentage of the total production of our capacity. But no, because Prime Minister suggested 2070, so we are taking 2050. So we just want to pass the buck. Even you will surprise people like me who are, I'm not consultant because I don't earn money, I preach freely, like a Pandit in India, as we say. Every consultant who is having his own visiting card now writing circular economy consultant. Without knowing a knowledge what is circular, for them, I think circular is a square only because they don't know the 4 corners of the circular economy or 7 corners of the circular. The NGOs are also the circular economy consultant. They should not, or they are working in circular economy. If you talk about the MNCs, I'm sorry to pronounce you, Coca-Cola, for example. Why Coca-Cola is serious about bottling, recycling? Because there's a legislation now. But people, individual, maybe 100 vendors are packaging for Coca-Cola. Why the quality of the Coca-Cola is different in US and UK, and that quality is not available in India, and you are blaming the water quality. Water we can always treat. So health, environment, industry, if you take Indian corporates, for example, they are more serious about energy conservation because you get money back. Mm-hmm. They are not serious about water conservation because they are getting it free from the ground without informing the government. And when the government will come to know, certainly there is act for it. How come you accept it? And then you are paying for it. So we are still, what is required? There are 3 things which are required if we want to move for circular economy. Number 1, there is need for training. Something like you, Pexa Global, must train to our ministry people. You must hire people like Pranshu or me or someone. I am freely available. Pranshu might charge some money from you. So what is required? There is a need for a training for our Ministry of Industry official, MOEFCC. See, earlier it was MOEF. When climate change came, they put CC. But they have no idea whether this CC is for cubic centimeter or it is for climate change. This is true. If you go to other regulatory institutions like CPCB or pollution control boards, they have no idea. One more example I will give you. There is a condition in most of the consent by the state pollution control boards, zero discharge, zero liquid discharge. It means that your water should not go out of your premises. A hotel in Rishikesh, the hilly region of the India, northern region or Himalayas, have a condition of zero liquid discharge. They have no place for liquid discharge. They have a small area like 10 by 15 feet. And night when everybody is sleeping in the hotel, they just pass it on to Ganga. And then Modi ji is cleaning Ganga. Modi is our prime minister. So this is the condition. This is the fact. You come with me and I will show you. And that is the reason throughout my life, my MD was never happy with me because I used to say, this is wrong here, this is wrong here, this is wrong here. But because the environment is something in my DNA, I started environmental when there was no act, even on Water Act came after 74, but I started environment much before that.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that starting point. And I guess I'm not gonna simplify what you said there, and there definitely were some provocations in there. And thank you for that, because I think, you know, these are complex topics, interconnected complex topics, and we have a very hard job as a species being able to look at the whole. So we focus on the small, like we pick a particular challenge and we try and solve for that, but we solve for that without thinking about the implications for the other elements. And I think what you described there is just the beautiful complexity of systems change. And that takes time to understand, and it's not easy, and it's not necessarily always replicable. And there are cultural, societal, infrastructural challenges, to your point, whether you're in the mountains, whether you're by the sea, whether you're in a city, whether you're in this particular industry. But I think having these conversations is also part, having that honesty. And you're right, you know, there's a chap called Ed Gillespie wrote a paper a couple of months ago, the topic of which was the problem with sustainability is sustainability consultants. Because there is this, and I mean, I include myself in that group, right? I'm just looking at you a little bit there, Sangita, as you're kind of nodding and smiling. But what I mean is, like, playfully, if the system measures your success by getting more work, what do you want to do? Get more work. So how do we change some of those paradigms? How do we look at driving shared value, proper impact that sees change, so that there are only good choices, because the system only allows people to make good choices? And with that, I'm going to come to you now, Sangita, actually, because if we think Dr. Esther has sort of given us a sort of starting point, but at PwC India, you're obviously looking at that industrial level and potentially across brands, across clients. What are you seeing, or what's coming back to you when clients are coming to you to sort of get into the discussion about circular economy?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to start by saying that, like Dr. Saxena said, circular economy has become the buzzword, but the principles of it has always been there in some form or the other for so many years now, right? It could have been called sustainability before. It could have been called lean practices before. In some way or the other, it has always been there in business. But the awareness levels have increased significantly on the concept of circular economy in the last 3 years. And with the government acknowledging it and saying that we are going to create action plans for 11 sectors, specifically looking at circular economy, the attention has increased significantly. And the government push, of course, goes into compliance, and compliance is the driving factor, the first step for any business to look at circularity. But in the Indian context, and based on the conversations that we are having with various clients, it's very clear that cost is the first point. Are there cost benefits that are coming to me? If there are, then I will start incorporating circularity principles in my business. And that is what we try to help our clients understand as consultants, because the challenge is, how do you quantify it? And the kind of value chains which are there for something like plastic, which Dr. Saxena picked up, the informal sector is so big. There are so many data gaps in the value chain. It's very difficult to quantify the benefit that you will get from becoming circular. And that is the challenge that we try to navigate by making sure that we make sure that the data from the informal sector also flows into the analysis, and we are able to quantify it for them. The challenge after that is, of course, to move from cost to value, because it's not just about cost when you're talking about circularity. And that is a conversation which is happening right now, because several brands want to move beyond compliance and look at how sustainable their business is, because it's not just about their shareholders anymore. They are looking at their investors, they're looking at their regulators, they're looking at their customers, they're looking at their employees. And for all these stakeholders, it's very important that you do some parts of your business in a manner because it's the right thing to do, not just because it's good business. So this is the balancing act that all businesses have to do, right? It's not just about cost, it's not just about value. You have to balance all these factors together. So you can start by saying that do it because it's the right thing to do, but unless the cost and the value parts of it balance it out, it will be difficult to sustain it. And sustaining it is the challenge that we have all throughout. I think I covered too many points in one shot, so I'm going to take a pause.
No, it's a good starting point, and I guess that resonates a little bit with me from my perspective. That if we think about this in terms of changing the global economy, and we can make it resonate with the engines of our economy, the businesses in our economy, and I completely take the point about the complexity of the investment, and we're going to get into some of that hopefully in a minute. Who pays today? I guess it always depends on your time horizon. Like the shorter the time horizon, the harder it is to see when the return is coming. If you push that out to 5 years, or you're licensed to operate in 50 years, we start thinking in those terms, maybe the metric changes slightly, but we haven't got there. We haven't got there yet. But I think the economics are important, and the economics are important because that can drive then the social and the environmental consequences that we want to see. If we prove the business models, the disruption in the innovation in business models, we can then potentially use that as shared value to drive some of these other elements. But I know that, again, that's a bit of an oversimplification. But quite nicely to kind of pivot maybe towards you then, Sangita, with 3M. And in preparation for this, we spoke, and one of the bits we were talking about, which I think Sangita pulled out there as well, is 3M, large global brand. The strategy is probably set at head office, which then trickles down to the different country offices. How have you had to handle and manage that when we think about where 3M's journey in India is today?
So, I mean, I think I would first like to, acknowledge the fact that, now we are in an urgent state, right, of climate change staring at us in the face, and everyone has to work together, and we're all trying to figure out how to get there. But having said that, I mean, if I had to talk about 3M, we've had sustainable practices, right from the 1970s, and largely because we're a manufacturing company, a manufacturing sort of led the way. But now I think I would say that it's a cohesive approach. It's a cohesive approach which takes all the departments, all the business groups together, and united by a purpose. A purpose that is articulated at at the CEO level, which talks about making those commitments to work towards net zero and all of those, and percolating those with clear metrics, for business groups, for manufacturing sites, having, specific roles created, to drive that, having leadership, to drive that. I mean, an example would be, someone in my role, looking at reporting, even simple things like, employee engagement, driving all of these in a very cohesive manner. I think that's the biggest change that I see in the last few years, where perhaps, we would have a page in a report which talks about sustainability initiatives to the entire communication, the branding message is around the purpose and is around really how are we driving sustainable value, So I think that's how I'm seeing it. And I play a small part in that, I would say, in my role.
And how much is and Dr. has mentioned this before around the sort of India's net zero strategy to 2070, how much of that is influencing the conversation today, or is that work, or like you said, the work has already been happening, and 2070 is so far away that we're just going to carry on doing what we're doing right now?
Yeah, I think so. The company is going to do what it needs to do, and we're not just looking at India alone. We're looking at a global level. So it's really about bringing a lot of the international best practices to India, those processes to help us move forward.
That's an interesting. I want to pick that up in a little bit, bringing international practices to India, because I've got a kind of musing in my mind around, this sort of concept that India is a very beautiful and complicated country for very many reasons, that actually this is probably not as easy for us to think about overlaying stuff that works elsewhere in the world, in the same way that stuff that may work around deposit return schemes in Europe doesn't work in the US. I think there's still that sort of opportunity to take the lessons, but very much develop an approach based on the societal and cultural and infrastructural challenges and opportunities that present themselves today in India. But that's not a contradiction to your point. It's just, I think that's an interesting thing to tug on in a bit. But coming to you then, perhaps you a little bit to we spoke in preparation for this around costings and practicalities. What are you seeing in your work when folks come to you to talk about circular economy? And I guess also on that, and I want to scale this back up to the other panelists as well, the motivations that are driving people at the moment to come to this conversation. How are you finding that at the moment?
Thank you, James. And I'd like to build on what Dr. Saxena ji said. And because a lot of what he said is actual reality. And we may want to admit it or not, but that is really the reality. And I am facing it on a daily basis. So what Karosambhav does at a grassroots level is create systems for organizations, generally very large organizations, global brands, to go circular and really land circularity in its truest form. So which essentially means, like think of a regular scenario. I mean, we as consumers, as people, individuals, we know where to buy products. All of us, whether it's a table, chair, my laptop, my mobile phone. Now let's look at the other part. Where does it go at the end of its life?
Yeah.
I have no clue. No one has clue, and no one even wants to have clue. We don't even want to talk about it. But let's hide it as deep as we can, and that's a reality. Let's talk about how much money goes into creation of a product. Now let's at the same time talk how much money goes into the uncreation of the product. For all creation, we expect the best of the best technology companies to do fantastic innovation, to do best of, hire best-in-class people, pay best-in-class salaries, get best-in-class consultants to do all the work. Now, for uncreating, which is the second half of the economy, I mean, we are not living on endless planet. We have planetary boundaries. The moment we talk of this second half of the economy, we expect a waste picker, running around, illiterate, not having food to eat, living in almost as rags as you can think. All of the largest of the large companies globally, as well as in India, we expect this person to do the magic. He has the magic pill to uncreate these products. No, we don't need to invest. We don't need to create collection systems. We don't need to create information-based systems. This guy is magical. He has the magic band. The whole country can rely. We can make our country resilient on resources. We can make our company, have the best in the best strategies. I was in Davos, a couple of weeks back, and one of the things which I was surprised was it an economic summit or was it an environmental summit? To me, it was shocking in a positive way, because at every single discussion, we were talking of planetary boundaries and where do we get the materials for industrialization 4.0? Where do we create the 6G network from? We are running out of almost everything. Yeah. And yet we will not want to talk about it in a decent enough way. So what Karosambhav does is essentially create grassroots level collection systems, so that as a person, if I know where to buy a product, ideally I should also know where to give it away. I should have full confidence in the system. This system should tell me what happens with it once I have participated, where does the material go. And at the end of it, at a country level, we have inventories of secondary material by which, new products can be created in a very reliable way. Now, all this requires a very different level of funding. All this requires very different level of thinking. And most importantly, it requires creating a budget for it.
Yes.
One of my central bodies of work that at least I am now focusing on is what is this budget that we are talking about? And honestly, after doing all the work, I find it's a decimal error correction on the books of most of the brands, just a decimal error correction. In most cases, we are talking, if I talk of electronic waste, we are talking of less than 0.2% of the average selling price of their products. If they just spend that money, we would have solved the problem. But here we are, fighting in a race. If I were to just share the numbers, we are doing refrigerator collection and recycling in this country at, anywhere between 8 rupees to 15 rupees, 16 rupees a kilogram. And brands are fighting, how do I reduce it to a zero? If we talk of multi-layered packaging, we are talking of, 3 rupees a kilogram, 3 rupees a kilogram. And we are fighting and dying. How do I reduce it to, less than 50 paisa? I mean, what are we seriously talking? How much money are we talking of going for getting circular? And why are we not mandating this? So, one of my realizations has been, and, having worked at Nokia, which was a superb company in terms of thinking circularity, we use different terminologies, but it is, great action and great scale can only happen if there is essentially a regulatory pressure. That's the only thing that we are finding things, something which makes things move, whether it is outside this country or in this country. But that then needs to be supported with enforcement. Unfortunately, we are extremely weak at enforcement today. So then the only option that remains, for me is how do I use the power of public to make it all happen? Can I look at crowdsourcing of intelligence to do those audits? Can I put all my data in the public domain? And we'll have to take those very radical steps if we are to change what is happening at this point in time. I'll take a pause here.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask you, you sort of answered there the sort of role that regulation plays in this. If the economics are, 0.2%, how does policy play into that? I'm just interested to the rest of the panelists as well. Do you think it's just policy that's the answer here? That's a bit of a loaded question. I know you're not going to say it's just policy, but what are the other mechanisms do we need to see to make this a reality? I'll just open that up to all of you.
Yeah. Number one, as Hipranshu mentioned, there's a need for a legislation, which we have, which we can have it also. But again, the enforcement is very poor because the government officials have no idea about what they are writing into it. They still go for a synchronized consent to operate or consent to establish which system we have, 6 pages, not even a single page is relevant to that industry. They have no idea whether they are writing consent to electroplating industry or Coca-Cola industry, for example. There is a vast difference in these two types of industry. Training is required at 3 levels. For politicians, little bit, so that legislation is there. For technician, our technical people in the ministry and CPCB and State Pollution Control Board. And there is need for a curriculum in all business schools and in all engineering colleges, which is something like name of Karo Sambhav. Karo Sambhav means do possibly. Am I right, Pranshu? Yeah. And that do possibly will have everything. Environment also, Ganga cleaning also, plastic disposal also, ESG also, sustainability reporting also, and circular economy also, and some terminology for tomorrow. Like I say, the climate change is something like manage unmanageable. So we must know at my education level how I'm going to manage, because they are going to be future managers tomorrow. And that is the reason I'm going to school and preaching them or giving some knowledge to them that why this segregation is important for us, why no littering is important for us. And when I go to school, I try to pick up some papers if they are around, so that at least it goes to a child mind that yes, we must pick up, we should not have any fear or shame in picking the garbage from the street also. If you see on Twitter, like for example, we have a tendency, we bring God to worship on Diwali on other occasion, and afterwards the puja or the worship is over, we go and take it to the nearby people tree and put it there. And the dog will come and piss it on the God also. So we have to remove those type of thinking. Everything, every relation, every activity of human being is ultimately having a pollution problem. And this is a part of so-called a good word circle. So awareness is very important at all levels, and we must do it.
So I wonder then if we use the word education, but actually what it is behavior change. It's someone mentioned it in the previous discussion. People inherently, we hope that people inherently want to do the right thing, but sometimes they do need a nudge. So Sangita, from your perspective then, and I guess because you sit across a number of industries, a number of perspectives, where do we've sort of dipped into policy, we've looked a little bit there around education. What are the other elements that you think we need to be focusing on when we consider this challenge in India?
I think I agree that policy is important and enforcement is a challenge. But if you're talking about circularity, I think it's about these multiple people coming together, right? No government on its own can achieve circularity. No regulator can do it. No business can do it on its own. These people have to collaborate and work together for circularity to happen. And we have seen examples, though very, very few, we have seen examples where a local business has collaborated with the local government, and together with the help of a local implementation agency, they have been able to create small circular projects happen. They are very, very small, far and few, but it is still possible. It's about how do we scale it up? How do we make it happen across the country, across sectors, across industries? Because it is not something that can be solved on a standalone basis. There is no one single way of handling it. Multiple people have to come together. So it is about private, public working together, implementation agencies working with policymakers. It is heartening to see that there are sparks here and there, like the government's action plan, and businesses starting to talk about beyond the boundary initiatives. Something like a zero liquid discharge, most people are able to do it because they are managing things within their boundary very well. They can bring in the best technology. But once they start talking about water resources, it's outside their control. How do they manage that? How do they share that resource with the communities around? It becomes more complex. And that's the kind of change in perspective which is going to help this conversation going forward, because now they are aware that there is only so much that we can do by ourselves. We have to go beyond our boundaries and look at what more can be done. So we have to look at that multi-stakeholder approach to circularity.
Yeah, just sort of understanding where your influence stops and who you need to engage with to push that to the next bit. Smith, then obviously coming to you next, and I guess there's whether love to hear if you've got any kind of other kind of enlightenments on that. But I also wanted to dig into some of the other work that your organisation has been doing, particularly when we spoke about sort of migrant populations and the food delivery that you're doing, and also the vaccination through COVID. Because I guess one of the points for me here is this is a very broad, nebulous topic, and it's easy to sort of sometimes forget where the people in those communities, we talk about communities, but where the individuals are. And for me, there's definitely something here around the resilience of communities and businesses' future license to operate, especially if there's a manufacturing plant there or it's invented. So if you could talk a little bit about that work, please, that'd be great.
Sure. So I think before I'd like to just kind of frame it within, like a strategic approach in terms of how we look at sustainability. So we're a science company. So our strategic framework for sustainability is around 3 pillars, which is science for circular, science for climate, and science for community. Science for circular, an important aspect of it is something called a sustainability value commitment. And in 3M, because we're an R&D company as well, since 2019, and this has been a transformational initiative across the organization, is that every product that's introduced, there are sustainability attributes embedded in a product that is introduced into the market. And this is done not just at a group of people in the lab, but this is actually you have scientists, you have business, you have marketing, you have EHS people all working together to really work on what are the how is a particular product reducing energy, using raw material that is recyclable, reducing water, and ensuring that those environmental claims are communicated responsibly. And similarly, under the Science for Climate is really looking at our customers' roadmap, sustainability roadmap, because we're a supplier to many industries, and to really understand and see where we can play a role and support their journey. And under Science for Community is where some of the work that we do in CSR is what comes under that. And I mean, I'd just like to give an example of how you look at a social problem, but you also look at all aspects of it. So with COVID, how healthcare became so paramount, and there was a lot of through CSR, companies were trying to see how we could support healthcare infrastructure and how do we enhance it. And a lot of the conversations were around, okay, let's provide medical equipment as quickly as possible, a lot of the critical equipment. And if you really look at it, we're all aware that in a lot of places, some of the equipment that's actually gone to address the crisis, in some of them they continue to be in packages, they're not opened. And then we were really thinking, okay, how do we play a more sustainable role in this space? So we looked at our manufacturing facility, where our biggest manufacturing facility is in Pune, and we were looking at, okay, how do we support the primary healthcare centers around our facility? And when we spoke to these centers, more than healthcare equipment, what they were really talking about was power supply. Not being able to cater to the emergency needs of the communities because they don't have power. And based on that insight is when we said, okay, let's take a more sustainable approach, and then look at putting up solar panels, or looking at giving them a solution to capture solar energy, store it, and then be operational during power cuts, right? And be able to do that. So in a sense, these are ways in which you can, you're not only addressing the larger healthcare issue, but you're also finding a more sustainable way to do it. So yeah, so some examples, but like I said, when these things happen on its own, you don't realize it, but when it's framed under a certain purpose and a framework, a strategic framework, and the direction the company wants to go, and when we communicate that to our customers and say, join us in this journey, that's where we feel that we can make a difference.
Interesting. It's again, and not to labor it, there is strength in taking time to understand the complexities of these problems and falling in love with the problem a bit, to kind of, like you say, to unearth where are those other intersections that can create benefits that aren't necessarily obvious, but will benefit the organization as a whole. Just drilling back a little bit then into the sort of finance, and Rashi, you mentioned about 0.25% on a product cost. I guess what are the other financial mechanisms that need to be explored in an Indian context to sort of facilitate this transition?
Okay. I'll also answer a few things. A question that you had asked before on policy and a multi-stakeholder dialogue.
Yeah.
Having spent time at Nokia and then doing certain consulting assignments, and now I'm finding the biggest challenge at the end of the day that we face in solving the problem at scale is the lack of competence. Lack of competence, when I say, I essentially mean understanding the topic in terms of what it actually is. We all, for example, end up talking about circularity without really understanding what is circularity. I mean, are we talking of material circularity? Are we talking energies circularity? Because, I've been having a lot of debates, both internally as well as externally, on, again, I would go back to Dr. Saxena, and I know him from CII days, almost 20 years back. I used to work with him in some form. But, at that time ISO 14000 came, then everything is ISO 14000. Then, after that sustainability as a term came, so then everything is sustainability. Now circularity has come, so everything is circularity. No, sorry, not everything is circularity. Circularity is not philanthropy. Circularity is not, reporting. Circularity is not this, and this. Circularity is about closing the material loops. And let's be absolutely clear about this. So no dialogue. I mean, yes, don't park everything under the term circularity, because that is not what it is. So before we say what is circularity, I think what we should also very clearly put what it is not. Because if everyone starts now reporting whatever they were anyway doing under circularity, sorry, now this is messy. And we'll have to come up with a new term tomorrow. When we talk circularity, we are talking of closure of material loops because we are running out of resources. Let's at least have the definition pinned thoroughly down. If we talk of extended producer responsibility in the system, I mean, ask every single person and you will be surprised how many people even understand the term extended producer responsibility. The term has been mismanaged, misused in so many ways. And I'm not talking of just India, but at a global level.
Yeah.
And this is what I find is a very peculiar problem. Researchers come with interesting terms and we quickly adapt at an industry level with in whatever formats to just say, okay, now we are this. Sorry, we were not this and we will never be this. Because this requires fundamental reshaping of the business. Where is that dialogue? Where is that strategy? Where is that talent pool who is going to do it? Mm-hmm. I would fundamentally go how much talent has been deployed to even uncovering circularity at a company level. No, the same person who was doing, let's say, and I'm part of that group. I'm nowhere saying that I'm different. So I used to, do these things. When we were doing A, the same person is now A. When we do B, okay, now the same person. Yeah. Sorry, these are different things. We are talking of we are talking research and development in ways that it has never been done before. How do I think of us? Very simple. I'll take just one simple component. All of us understand a resistor, a diode, a capacitor. How do I break these back to their elemental forms? Can anyone in this world give me an answer? And I've been searching this, through and through, and no one knows. Even a simple thing like laptop screen. All of us use laptops and a mobile phone. They have screens. It has 3 different layers of materials. 70% of this material, no one knows how to recycle globally. Mm-hmm. Why are we not asking these questions? Because circularity sometimes becomes about philanthropies, other times it becomes citizenship, and other times it becomes so I think this is an important point that I'd like to bring, and then to address your point about what is it that we do financially. I think just one thing, put data on public domain, how much is company spending on circularity, and I'm saying closure of material loops. How much money are they investing in terms of telling people, this is my collection channel. I sold this product to you. I mean, I also look at it as a form of social justice from a individual point of view. I ought to know what I do with this mess that you have sold me, 10 years back, 15 years back. Yes, it had a utility, but sorry, now it's a mess. And I don't know how to handle this mess of materials. In no negative way, I'm implying this, but that is the reality if we understand the material complexities. There is no way to undo the mess of materials that we have created. And until and unless we are putting that data in public domain, I spend so much on creating retail. I spend so much on creating collection channels for getting my product back. I have created put so much money in creation of this product from an R&D, perspective. I have put so much money in figuring out how do I uncreate this product. I put so much money on sales. I put so much money on getting it recycled. I put so much money on assembly. I put so much money on getting it, secondary material back into the economy. I think until and unless, I can't think of any other matrix because everything is too complex. Too many people will be required to enforce. I think we have to rely on public intelligence. There are enough people globally who will pick up these data sets and make sense out of it. Let that data be out.
I do wonder if, and maybe this is a bit romantic, that eventually, given the points you were saying before, or given the points we were discussing before around scarcity of resources, the brands will have to work this out because it is inherent to their business model. When I think about
my worry is, James, it will happen too little, too late.
And that's the challenge. Exactly.
we are turning at the point of no return. 2030 is the clock which runs in my head. Every single day goes backwards.
Yeah.
And let me also bring one more topic here, which is, I use it in my dialogues nowadays, which is around time dimension. Every one of us work in a different time dimension. If I'm an employee, my time dimension is my next bonus and my next increment. So I have to save company money, and I have to, ensure that I look good. If I am a CEO, then I need to have my great stakeholder returns. So annually, my year-on-year profitability matters. So, if we start looking at, we have to have one common time dimension to have multi-stakeholder partnerships succeed. Today, everyone, when we sit on a table, we have different dimensions. Think of a politician. His agenda is, how do I get votes from whatever work I'm doing? And there is nothing wrong. All of us will have our own motives. But what is that one common time dimension that we agree upon and then work backwards? And that is the only place, 2030, considering how much importance is being given in all reports to 2030, that's the turning point. Are we working backwards from that and counting every single day that is getting lost?
No, well, no. No is the answer, isn't it? I think we should be, but we're not. So I guess, Sangita, coming to you then, because picking on Prash's points, like potentially that's the crux of it, whether it's policy as a carrot as a stick, whether it is finding the right investments. How do we get businesses, organizations to be doing the right thing today?
Yeah, I really like Franchu's idea of having this common goal timeline that everybody works with. But the idea of having the data and reporting figures across all steps of the value chain, like Franchu was suggesting, I think the first step has been taken by BRSR, which has come in India. The mandate that companies should report on all the ESG criteria as well. It's a small step, but I think it's the step in the right direction. Next year onwards, it's going to become mandatory. And I think that should give us hope that going forward, there will be more transparency. We will have more accountability coming from businesses across the board to give us the clarity on how exactly this is happening, which helps, which is social justice, like Franchu was saying, and also gives confidence to the regulatory authorities as well, because that helps in enforcement in a way of speaking, right? So I feel like we are on the right path, but very slow. I have to admit that as well. It should be faster considering the kind of challenges which are there. Something as basic as resource risk, which is the driving factor for businesses to look at local alternatives for their raw materials, which is the starting point of starting their circularity journey, is also happening in a very, very slow manner. The number of businesses who have started evaluating it, just the range of capabilities, maturity when it comes to understanding concept is so much. And James, you mentioned it's a complex geography when we are talking about India. So the kinds of businesses, the kinds of maturity levels when it comes to something like this itself vary so much that it becomes a bigger challenge than it should be.
Yeah, I want to come to Dr. S next, if I may, because I was going to ask you, are you hopeful? And I saw you sort of you shook your head a few times there when Sangita was sort of commenting there. I over 4 decades and to the point before around sustainability goals, CSR, ESG, circular economy. We now hear terms like regenerative. Have you seen this all before? Are we just kidding ourselves that we're talking a very good game but not really getting down to it?
If you talk about 4 decades ago, there was a time when we used to distribute something and it was not a corporate social responsibility. Today, when you say, for example, a Birla ji is coming to a village and giving a blanket to everybody during the winter, then everybody will say Birla ji is a very good person. Transparency was not there, but our commitment to the person was very much there. Today, we are more mature. We want transparency everywhere, as well as we want to involve also. Everybody, each stakeholder say, please involve me, then I will know what you are doing for us. Today, CSR is also, when 2014, the act came, India has suggested that we will have 20,000 crores of rupees to look after the people. But in one vicinity, there are 4 corporates. Everybody is working for a school. Somebody is giving fans, somebody giving chairs, somebody giving a mattress. What is required to go? Everybody put money together and go for an international school or national level school or CBSE school, so that there is no need of village students to go 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers away from them. So we are lacking in our CSR activities also. The Sangita mentioned about BRR. This is 12,000 years old project. It started in 2012, I think it's 10 years old now. It was BRR earlier. Unless BSC will go into few reports, it is an eyewash. It is same like we submit environmental audit to the Pollution Control Board. Each and every industry person, if we decide, I have coined a word called individual social responsibility, that I will look after my environment, I will look after my area, the way I clean my home, my drawing room, I will clean my office table, I will clean my company, I will do something for the company, then it, because environment or circular economy is something like family planning. You have to knock every day if you want to achieve something. Sorry, Smita, maybe it is not reflective. The role of corporate communication is to publish the sustainability report. If they are in charge of the sustainability or circular economy, then company will never achieve circular economy, which is happening in most of the cases. For example, Tata Power is looked after by a corporate communication person who has no idea what is circular, whether it is a square or hexagonal. Ambuja Cement, corporate communication, if they are in charge, then people who are working for sustainability, environment, EHS, plastic recycling, they are feeling bad to report to a person who has no knowledge. And then he writes like a bureaucrat, please discuss. And that discussion keep on going. So there are many faces. We have to knock industry. CSO, CEO role is very much important. Another thing, Pranshu, which is missing is the role of industry associations. Their role is to organize a conference, give a good lunch, a bag, a pen, preferably pink for the girls and blue for the boys, and finish circular economy is over then. They are not knocking industry that you must move in this direction. The role of consultant like PwC, KPMG, and why, sorry, Sangita, is just tip mark. I am saying I don't lie after 6 o'clock in the evening. Sangita will say Saxena is right. This is the role of the consultant. Consultants are not giving a feasible solution. And for this tick mark, if they charge 20 lakhs of rupees, industry said, no, sorry, we will not go to you. We will go to KPMG. They will do this for 3 lakhs of rupees. Yeah. Sorry, Sangita. So we have to knock from all the direction. It's not difficult. We can achieve. I agree, we should have a common goal. We must work for it and we must achieve.
Excellent. Smitha, I'm obviously going to come to you next because I have a, one of some of the work that I do, for me, when I think about circular economy, when I think about systems change, and I guess to Dr. S's point there a little bit, but almost the other side of that coin, a lot of these topics are inaccessible for most folks because we use $25 words rather than $3 words. We spend all of our time in executive summaries and picking up sound bites that we can use on our next conversation to appear knowledgeable. But I've got a big thing around how we tell these stories differently. So for me, I do think, to your point, Dr. S, I do think comms do have a role, but I don't think it's being used yet correctly. I think it's being used, as you quite rightly said, to articulate something externally and internally, which makes everyone just go, well done, let's tick and move on. But actually there is something in there. So could you kind of pull on that thread a little bit for me with your work around comms for sort of 3M? Because when I look at 3M as a large global organization, a large global brand, like many global brands, touch many geographies, many different material streams. How do you start telling those stories better so your consumers, your supply chain, your value chain understand what you're trying to do?
So, the way I see it, right, I think, if maybe a few years ago, and I did mention this a little earlier when I was talking about how all of this used to happen in pockets within the organization, right? So you had manufacturing that would do a bunch of initiatives. You had, R&D that would work on, products. And then you had CSR that would do the community. I think, corporate communications, increasingly, the kind of role that, say, perhaps somebody in sustainability communications, the role is to really pull in all this unified and build an impact story, because then you kind of, and I think that wasn't happening before, so when you start to see what is the impact the company is making, you begin to really see, are these, small initiatives really adding up, or should we be thinking strategically, right? I also think that, leadership commitment, having these, and the role of communications is to frame these as, while you can call it a strategy, it is what guides businesses. It is what is guiding, the kind of people we hire. And I mean, I can, we can all see that, at least in companies, the kinds of roles that are coming out, right? So you have, and I did talk about, our sustainability value commitment. You have you have new product, the new product marketer, right? A marketer that is working on new product commercialization has to be aware of has to understand the language of sustainability, and needs to do that. And in my role, the kind of interactions that I'm having with various departments of the organization not only enhances my knowledge, but I'm able to now connect the pieces together. The one thing that a communications professional can do is to really throw light and tell a story, and we all know that stories is what people hold on to, right? And each one of us during the course of this call, this session has highlighted a story or an experience, and we're all communicators. So I really do think that communications are more strategic, and looking at, say, the BRSR report itself, while the role may be to kind of put the information together, but it's really about leading a team of stakeholders and bringing all the work that they do, and then showing that collective impact as an organization. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. That resonates with me a lot. And I guess it's always that natural tension between telling the right story or telling the right story. And the answer to that depends on your perspective in the organization. So I think it is really important. I've just glanced at the clock and realized we're at 59 minutes. So we have rattled through the last hour, and I'm pretty sure we could carry on for another couple, but unfortunately, time is, we've run out of this particular time dimension to pull back to Prashni's point before. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I do just want to come to one of them quickly and then throw it to all of you, just so that we do get something. And I want to pick up this one particularly because it's been a thread throughout this conversation. Do you think impact accounting instead of profit accounting can fundamentally change attitude? Why I pick this one is because it's not necessarily that question specifically, but I think it links back to this idea of behavior change. So is this as simple as using a new metric to measure success that will help us drive towards it? Or is that an oversimplification? What do we think?
The thing, so James, from my point of view, this is oversimplification. I mean, we have had some fantastic indices which have been proposed by various institutions. I mean, whether we look at how do we measure progress at a country level, instead of a GDP, should I look at some other measures? And Yale has done some fantastic work in this direction. But I mean, how do you change norms which are already existing? The whole world is working on that one common matrix. I mean, yes, easier said than done, but can it happen so again, it is important to go back to the planetary timeline and then come and see, can I do it in time? The answer is a serious no. Why even waste time? Why even discuss this? So can it happen in 9 years from now? Or, we are today at 22, 8. So can it happen in that 8 years? Are we really talking of that fundamental revolution? The answer is no. Then why even waste time on this? Let's pick up things that are doable within the planetary boundaries and the timelines that we have left with. And if we are not, again, it goes back to unless we all agree on the common timeline, this is the time in which we have to act. If we don't do that, we can keep on discussing, we can keep on reinventing, from circular economy to uncircular economy to uncreation to whatever, we will not sort it in time.
Thank you. Anyone else got any other last sort of thoughts or comments?
I just wanted to add that I think in terms of moving from profits to accountability and quantifying that as part of business reporting, the whole idea of ESG related reporting itself is a step towards that, right? You are acknowledging that it's not just about shareholders and what they get. I feel like I'm the most optimistic person in this panel, but I feel like
Sangita, I am Karo Sambhav. My name is Karo Sambhav, so we will make it possible. So
you have to be a little optimistic.
Sorry, I may sound negative, but I am. We are possibility. I mean, this whole discussion is about possibilities, and we will create it.
And consultant has to be positive,
And the thing is, we are in the game. We are the players, and as long as you are in the game, you have an opportunity, right? So, and I mean, I really do think that global impact reports, right? That's how those reports are going to be game changing for companies, because we all know that something happening in one facility in some part of the world impacts the entire company and the brand. So it's not just something that happens at the head office, like today, tomorrow, something that happens in India affects the brand. It resonates everywhere. So you cannot, and especially global brands, I think that's where it becomes complex. But the point is, with regulation, with these kind of mandatory reporting disclosures, organizations have to transform. It's not just a department that is going to do that work, and everyone forgets about it.
Well, I'm going to use that as to sort of round us off, because I think that was a more positive perspective on where we'd gone with the conversation at that point. But to all of you, thank you so much. So genuinely, thank you very much. I think your point there, Smitha, about you've got to be in the game. Actually, what gives me hope is the fact that you four are in the game, right? Because this conversation is the type of conversation everyone needs to be having. There are some very clear near-term opportunities, but there are some barriers, there are some challenges that we have to overcome, and we can't overcome them by ignoring them or running away from them. We have to overcome them by having an honest conversation about what is practical today and what needs to shift for us to kind of solve that tomorrow. And so Prati, if you got
just one short, very, very tiny point. I think the authenticity of the conversation today is the authenticity we need in all conversations. The day it happens, we will have solved the problem. It is not about, even time limits. Humans are those, from my point of view, where we can create anything from wherever we are. We have that possibilities. But the thing is, are we doing authentic conversations at all times? I find a lot of authentic conversations happening where, we are pleasing someone just because someone has to be pleased, without looking at the mess that we have created. The moment we change, I really loved the beauty of this conversation. And if we just do this sort of conversations every day, I think we'll fundamentally change the world.
Excellent. I completely agree. To all of you, thank you very much. To the audience, thank you for your questions. Apologies we didn't get to many more of them. What we'll try to do as the Pixera Global team is capture those and get you answers where we can. I think I'm now going to hand over to Shilpa. So finally, thank you to all four of you. Thank you for the preparation for this call and for joining us at this late time in India and this early time in DC, Dr. S. Thank you very much. Shilpa, over to you.
Thank you, James. Thank you. And it's been a very, very some part provocative and insightful discussion and very engaging. So thank you to each of our panelists. As an acknowledgement of your participation, we have donated 5 saplings for each of you through Reforest India. You will be receiving communication soon from Reforest India regarding the same. To our audience, the second part of this conversation and the summit is on June 24th. On June 24th, the attempt will be to shift the narrative from endless conversations to action and highlight why communities need to be central to any action plan. The registration link for June 24th is in the chat box in case you haven't registered yet. Please join us and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening, good day, depending on where you are.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.